Hello, welcome to episode 2 of How to Win a World Cup. I want to begin by taking you back to 1999. Clive Woodward is the New England rugby coach, and he's a man who refuses to leave a single thing to chance, and that includes bringing people on board from all walks of life to help him. One of those people was a management consultant called Humphrey Walters, a man who had just sailed 30,000 miles around the world the wrong way, into the wind and into the storms, for no reason other than to study what it takes to win under pressure. One day Walters turned to Clive and said, "The Marines, that's where the players should go. Let's see if we can spend a day or two with them." The idea appealed to Clive immensely, so Walters flew a helicopter down to Lympstone, the commando training centre of the Royal Marines in Devon, and asked whether they would put the England rugby team through something close to what they put their own recruits through. I know all this because I sat down with the Royal Marine who ran it, Lieutenant Colonel George Matthews, and he walked me through the whole thing. So let me tell you what the Marines actually taught England and why it proved so useful. The first thing was something called the buddy-buddy system. Matthews explained it to me with an image I've never forgotten. In Norway, he said, when it's minus 25, you do not check your own ears for frostbite, you check your buddies. And if he loses an ear, it's your fault, not his. Your responsibility is never to yourself, it's always to the man beside you, and it spins outwards from there, to your selection, your troop, the whole corps. Clive heard that and he wanted it on a rugby field. He wanted 15 men who, at the final whistle, could look at each other in the eye and said, "I did everything I possibly could for you." The second thing was what the Marines called dislocated expectations. Your best laid plan will fall apart. The enemy will be exactly where you were promised they wouldn't be. The orders will change every 5 minutes. You will not sleep for 4 days. So the question is not whether everything goes wrong. It will. The question is how you behave when it does. It's how you cope under pressure when nothing is going the way you want it to. It's easy to get on with things when it's all going to plan, but being in the Marines is about coping when things don't go to plan. The third thing was leadership and the hunting of it. When the rugby players first walked in, 15 Royal Marines were lined up to meet them, shoulders back, staring straight ahead. The players stared back. There was a standoff, Matthews said, 2 tribes sizing each other up across a room. And then someone spoke and the barriers came down. The Marines could see at once that there was a squad within a squad, the old hands who would give everything, and the new boys who didn't quite yet feel they had earned the right to. The job Clive had set the Marines was simple: find the leaders and pull everyone else up to meet them. It was not all reverence, mind. Matthews told me that looking after a group of international rugby players was like herding cats. Tell them to be somewhere at 5 to 10 and they would think about ambling over at 10ish, which to a Royal Marine is something close to blasphemy. They could hardly believe it. The other thing that he told me was that he'd never laughed harder than watching them try to fit Martin Johnson and Jason Leonard into standard issue kit. Leonard simply didn't have a Marine-sized neck, so they had to send out for bigger sizes. Clive went down twice, 10 weeks before the World Cup and again 4.5 weeks before it, and he came home with some of the lessons that would define him. He told me that the Marines simply looked more elite than his squad, sharper, on time, no slack anywhere. They got the smallest things absolutely right, always smart, always on time, efficient, confident and respectful. So he set about making sure that the England team were more like the Marines. As well as asking the Marines to identify leaders, Clive also asked them to look for energisers and energy sappers, people who took from the morale of the team and people who gave to it. One sapper, one moaner, one man who drains the room when it's cold, hard and frightening, can quietly sink the entire thing. Clive told his players to their faces that he would not tolerate an energy sapper and would not pick one for England, however gifted. By 2003, every single man in that squad was an energiser. In fact, Clive liked the Marines so much that he took one home with him, a man called Nathan Martin who helped run the training. He left the Corps and joined Clive's England staff. So a bit of the forest, came back to Twickenham with him. 4 years later, England won the World Cup. Now, here's where the story turns. In Woodward's camp, working as one of his fitness men prior to the 2003 World Cup, was a quiet, exacting character called Dave Reddin. He was there for all of it. He saw what 2 days in the forest did to a group of men, and he carried it with him out of rugby, through Team G at the 2012 Olympics, and finally into the one organisation that had been failing for a generation, the Football Association. So when English football set out to rebuild its broken, frightened, divided national team, it was Dave Reddin who stood up and said, "I know what we need to do. I've watched it work with my own eyes. Let's take the footballers to the Marines." Same idea, same place, same man carrying it from one sport to another 20 years on. So, in June 2017, Gareth Southgate's England footballers reported for what they assumed was an ordinary training camp. They were halfway through a meeting when the door burst open. A Royal Marine walked in and told them to leave everything behind, even their phones. One text home to say they would be off the grid for 48 hours and then they were gone. The football trip was meant to begin with helicopters. They went by road instead, 5 hours into Woodbury Common, the training ground of that same Commando Training Centre at Lympstone. Mud smeared on their faces, building their own shelters under fly sheets, eating rations out of a bag with a hole in the ground for a toilet, some of the best paid young men in the country sleeping in the dirt. And then came the sheep dip, a short, filthy tunnel of freezing brown water you cannot see through and cannot breathe in. You have to plunge in, fully under, arms forward, no twisting, no turning back, pushed in by one Marine, and trusting completely that another is waiting at the far end to drag you out. It's not really about water, it's about fear and composure and trusting those men to get you in and out safely. The same trust George Matthews has described to me 20 years before. And who went first with the footballers? Not the captain, not the hard man, Gareth Southgate. "I'll go in first," he said, and down he went into the cold and dark, and a Royal Marine named Major Scotty Mills hauled him out the other side. There's an old commando rule that a leader never asks his people to do anything that he will not do himself. Southgate had just lived it, in freezing water in front of every player he wanted to follow him. That night the players sat in the pitch dark, no phones, no screens, and they talked. One of the Marine instructors said afterwards that he had never in his life seen an England squad behave like that. The honesty of it, the togetherness, the players and the Marines around one table, eating together, swapping stories. And at the very end, Southgate did something telling. He went quietly to the Marines and asked them a question. "Of all my players, who has the most leadership in him?" The answer came back without a flicker of hesitation. Kane, by a distance. A little while later, Harry Kane was made captain of England. So what are the key takeaways? Number 1, your job is the player next to you, not yourself. Number 2, fill your team with energisers and clear out the energy sappers, however talented they are. You know when you see a coach dump a talented player from a squad and people are wondering why, sometimes it's because they might be talented individuals, but they don't bring enough to the team. They sap energy from it. Number 3, expect the plan to fall apart and train yourself to stay calm when it does, because it will. Dislocated expectations. Both teams use that exact phrase 2 decades apart, and that should tell you everything. Number 4, be elite in the tiniest things, on time, sharp, no slack, because the standard you accept in private is the standard you play to in public. Number 5, lead by going first, into the cold water, before you ask a single other person to follow you in. 2 coaches, 2 sports, 2 decades apart, sent their players to the same Royal Marines and came back with the same handful of hard truths. That's not luck and it's not coincidence. The rugby players didn't touch a rugby ball and the footballers didn't touch a football, but they learned important lessons about the behaviour of teams that lead to winning teams. They learned about teamship, leadership and standards. Next time I'll show you the thing every winner I have ever met has in common. They do not hope to win, they decide to, and they build everything around the decision. See you then.